you get?
We're testing the microphone.
I think it's great.
Pay no attention to the man behind the screen.
And when I get up, if I need to turn you up or down, I will.
I think it sounds wonderful, and that is crystal clear. What a magnificent projector. Wow.
Right now, the microphone on the podium is turned on, so you don't want to be
Don't
getting
stand too close.
Right. I will be shutting it off. I think Heather's going to say a few words, right?
Okay.
And then when she's done, I will turn it off, and then you can get close. Okay.
My microphone up there is not on. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Dr. Steve Phillips is such a wonderful, wonderful lecturer. You're going to learn so much today. He truly believes in lifelong learning, and we are very excited to have him here today. Please welcome Dr. Steve Phillips.
Good afternoon. Happy summer from last week. Happy 4th of July coming this weekend. We are all going to have an opportunity within a few days to start complaining about how hot it is outside. It's only been a couple of months since we were complaining about how cold it is. What do you mean it's 7 degrees in April? At least with this heat, all you got to do is stay inside, and we don't have to shovel it. It'll be over, and then we can complain about the cold in no time at all. It's wonderful to be back to continue our lifelong learning program. Heather, thank you for the invitation to be here. But more equally importantly, thank all of you. If this wasn't interesting and you weren't able to attend and there was nobody in the audience, guess who would be out the front door? I appreciate your support is what I'm saying. Thank you. I wouldn't be able to be here without you. We have a wonderful class this afternoon on the multiple roles of women in ancient Egypt. As we're going along, if anyone has any questions or comments, feel free to just put your hand up or shout it out. Remember, if there's 150 questions, we're going to be here a little bit longer because my program is about an hour, but we're here for lifelong learning. We are never too old to learn something. That's why we're here. And as I've said to you before, you will not have a quiz, you will not have a final exam, and there's no term papers. So don't hesitate to ask questions. That's why we're here. Are we ready to go off to Egypt for a little bit? I think you're going to be amazed at how much we actually know. So off we go on the roles of women in ancient Egypt. Stand up here. I love the screen. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Must be fun for movie night. As Heather just said, I am Dr. Steve Phillips from the Penn Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology. I have been very blessed in my career. I have a PhD in what's known as biological anthropology, which is a whole lot of mouthful of words, but that means we study ourselves through time, across continents, as long as we've been on this planet and everywhere we've been elsewhere. This is the most recent archaeological project that I've been part of. I have been on archaeology digs in Jordan, my very first one, at a site called Petra. Anyone heard of that place? Something we can look at in the future, by the way, was my very first dig ever. So that is something that I can take you behind the scenes, show you what it's like to learn how to be an archaeologist, and learn about a population that built one of the most extraordinary ancient cities 2,000 years ago. This excavation, I'm sitting on the corner of a 4,500-year-old tomb in the cemeteries immediately behind the Great Pyramids. I was out there as the site supervisor and the anthropologist for a joint project with Cairo University and Brown University from here in the United States. And we had received permission from the Egyptian government to re-clear and re-excavate about 10 acres of this cemetery in behind the pyramids. We were there every January from 2002 through 2006, and we were back in 2009. And then in the next decade after that, we spent a lot of time publishing a book, which is like one of those. It's a fantastic thing to be able to do, to go to work every single day and you have to drive past those things. I'm from around here. I grew up in Westchester. This is a long way from home, Toto. But it's an extraordinary thing I've been able to do, and even more extraordinary that I'm able to share it with all of you. So off we go. We're going to talk about women, pretty much in chronological order. On the left is a portion of a statue that we will come back to of the queen, the wife of the king who built the third pyramid, the one that's not on this particular shot, the smaller one that's over to the right, smaller one that's on the left when you're looking at it from the front with the Sphinx staring at you. The statue on the other side brackets us chronologically. It is believed that this is an image of Cleopatra herself. The Cleopatra that we are so familiar with, she's actually Cleopatra the Seventh. In the era in which she lived, a period of time of about 300 years, there were numerous queens who all had the name Cleopatra. She was the last in a line that lasted for 300 years. We're going to touch on her, but we can come back to her and do a specific class on her and her alone, and we can do that in the future. I do know we have another class scheduled for September. Since it is so close to Halloween and fall and all of that, we're going to talk about ancient Egyptian mummies and put them in their context. Spending quality time with dead people. Don't be scared. It's nothing going to scare you. You're going to love it. We're going to talk about these guys and put them into context. As I said, I'm down at the Penn Museum. Many of you I know have visited over the years. We have the largest freestanding Sphinx in the Western Hemisphere, and that's what you're seeing on the screen now. On December the 12th, we will open, and on a permanent basis, one of our two major ancient Egyptian galleries that we have been in the process of overhauling for the last decade. December the 12th, one of our two galleries will open. It will be phenomenal. When I come in September, I'll bring you a little piece of video to show you what it's going to look like. Once it opens, it will be permanent. It's not going to close. This is a refurbishment of a gallery that the last time we did it was 1929. So once every 100 years, whether it needs it or not. Let's leave the comforts of Souderton and let's move over to the northeast corner of Africa. Let's come down on the ground and begin to talk about the roles of women in ancient Egypt more than meets the eye. And the reason I say that, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, every time you see pictures of Egyptians, what do you often notice? The eyes. Yeah. And the literally black makeup around those eyes. We're going to touch base on that. We're going to show you what we know about women, what we know left over from artifacts, what we know from writing, from monuments, things that have been built. It's a pretty diverse world considering how far back in time it is. Let me just jump back very quickly to this slide because I want to share something with you. This woman, Cleopatra, is separated in time from the woman on the left by 2,450 years, give or take. Cleopatra lived 2,000 years ago. But the pyramids, when she was born, had already been there for almost 2,500 years when she was born. I've said this to you when we were here before. Cleopatra the Seventh is closer in time to the iPhone than she was to the building of the pyramids by 500 years. This is the kind of time we're talking about in a place like ancient Egypt. So let's get down on the ground. Let's see what we've got. We open with what do we know about Egyptian society in general. Like virtually every ancient civilization, ancient Egypt was a highly stratified and male-dominated society. That's the way they were. I present this picture, which is a panel of carved relief from a tomb of a gentleman named Ihi. I'm intimately familiar with it because this was a University of Pennsylvania Museum archaeological project led by my boss, Professor David Silverman. And our mission was to go to this tomb chapel, put sheets of clear plastic over things like this, copy it, then you can roll that up, bring it back home, unroll it, and turn it into a publication. I just want to show you this because it is a good example of highly stratified, male-dominated society. Can you make out right here? Can you see my pointer all right? From this angle, it's a little bit faint, but I think you can see it. See the knees right up there in the upper left? And the legs come down and there's feet. By the way, he's got 2 left feet, the way they always portrayed it in this kind of art. I'm focusing on the person right here, down at below his knee, with her arm crossed here. She is identified in the text right up above as this man's mother. And the reason I wanted to open with this, even though you can tell by the scale, by the size of this male individual, and this is just a crop of a big scene fills up a full wall. So he is sitting over here. They're both presenting themselves as already being in the afterlife. They're waiting for offerings to be brought to them to sustain them while they're in for the rest of eternity. So the thing that's important, here's hieroglyphs real quick. You see that thing that looks like a mouth? See it? That looks like a Pac-Man on a stick? Those, and there's another row of them down here. That's the Egyptian hieroglyph for 100,000. So they're waiting for 100,000 of that fowl, 100,000 of that one, 100,000 of that one, 100,000 of that one, 100,000 of cattle, antelope, gazelle, all that other stuff they're waiting for. She is portrayed in a very, very prominent position in this man's tomb. That says a lot just for the role of women right there. It's his tomb. He's hoping all these things will be provided for him to sustain his immortal soul through the afterlife. But he has included his mother. She's not pushed off to the side. However, you can tell the difference when we saw that first slide, highly stratified, male-dominated. Who is the larger character in the scene? The male. Exactly. So we still have that stratification, but we also have an important role for the female. That's just to open up. How was ancient Egyptian society set up? How did they exist for all these thousands of years and even through today? At the very top of Egyptian society would have been the king, which we refer to as a pharaoh, and of course his queen and their immediate children. They are at the very top of the heap. They are equivalent to the world of the gods and goddesses of ancient Egypt. The king was considered to be the human intermediary between the land of the living, the people of Egypt, and the divine world that they worshiped. This family, this man, was the direct intermediary between them. The next level down in their society was the royal family itself, which could be the queen and any children and relatives, and the literate elite ruling group. These are people who could read and write hieroglyphs, people who were involved in international economics, people who were involved in the very upper echelons of Egyptian society, right down from the king. Beneath them, palace administrators, military leadership, they're the next level of Egyptian society. Below them, civil administrators, priests, and the priesthood. Then we get down to all of us, me self-included, the regular folk of ancient Egypt. That is the stratification. I don't know if you can see from the angle from where the sun is right up here behind the word office of king. That's a photo I took at our archaeology dig that I just showed you the panel from. Can you see the sunbeams? And what shape do the sunbeams make? Coming this way and this way, and right through here. Maybe it's difficult to see, but they form a perfect pyramid. Say it. The inspiration for the look of the pyramids themselves, right from nature. When we're trying to research this topic, there are challenges in collecting any kind of archaeology data that I can present to you. As you know, everything that I present is based on actual archaeology, things I've been involved with myself, things that I'm involved with in my field. I've been doing this for over 30 years now. I've been very blessed to have worked in Jordan 2 times, worked in France for 4 summers in a row, And I know every time I say that, people go, oh, you poor thing. 4 summers in a row in France. Not if you have weather like this and you're living outside in a tent. Not so much fun. The challenges in data collection when you're looking at something specific like what do we know about women? We have things that affect our ability to understand this ancient world. Challenges in data collection include ancient Egyptian towns and villages. We hardly have any that have survived. Why is this? Preservation is compromised when the homes are built on a floodplain. You may know this, or I've said it before, every summer around June, the Nile River would slowly overflow its riverbanks. It would swell with water from the monsoon rains in Central Africa that happen at this time of the year. That water would flow north. The Nile would overflow its riverbanks through Egypt, spread out as much as a mile on either side. Not a tsunami, just a slow, gentle rise of the river. People looked forward to it because the river water was essentially brown with rich soil that it had picked up in its long journey from Central Africa. By the end of the summer, the waters would retreat back into the riverbanks and leave behind a thick, fertile layer of fresh soil that it had carried from Central Africa. So everybody's fields were replenished every single year with fresh, highly fertile soil. A great thing to have happen. But homes were overwhelmingly built with sun-dried mud brick. What happens when you mix mud brick with water tends to return to the mud from which it originated, which makes it a little bit of a challenge for somebody like an archaeologist coming along thousands of years later. Where were these villages? Right? They get used over and over and over and over again. That's just one example of the challenges in data collection. But we do have some things. This is a model of what a house very probably looked like. Something that you could hold in your hand. Something that looks to me like something that we used to make in 3rd grade when they gave you some clay and make an ashtray for your grandmother. That kind of an idea. A home could have been as simple as this. Yes, there's a wall around it, and there's a shelter to get out of the weather if you want to sleep in there overnight. The cooking area, if anybody wants to know where the kitchen is, can you see it right over here on the right? You got the pots on top of it, you got the stove down here, so to speak, and laying on the ground in there is meat being butchered prior to it being cooked on that oven over there. We have to say this may be an idea of what someone's house or a family's house looked like. We have this one, a little bit more elaborate. The holes going around the perimeter are indicating that in its day, if this was a freestanding house, they would have had poles in there with maybe cloth flags fluttering in the breeze. Maybe they would have put poles with leaves and branches in it. But look here, they've got a second story. You can go up the staircase here. There's a hole there. You can go inside and make a cooking fire or a fire to keep you warm in the wintertime. And down there, there's a window. Over there on the right, the same position is what would have been the open air cooking area. And animals being butchered laying on the ground, and you can still see the finger marks of the person who made that in the clay. Pretty nifty thing right there. This is a reconstruction in modern times of what an elite person's house probably looked like. We do have images of things like this on the walls of people's tombs who were high officials. I like this because you've got a water feature right here. Your own swimming pool. And here we are coming home from work being carried by 2 chair carriers. Exactly the way they take you to dinner here, yes? Come to your room and carry, no? This is modern, 1920s. I just wanted to show you quickly what that flood used to look like. Washing away everywhere, challenging our ability to dig up these ancient cities. This is what one of the cities actually looks like today in the southern part of Egypt, Hierakonpolis. The Nile River is out here flowing by. This is the West Bank. That whole big area of mud doesn't look like anything. The staircase going down is modern. That's in case tourists want to go visit here. I don't think there's anybody in this room, if you took a trip to Egypt, you'd want to go and look at a mud flat. So hardly anybody ever goes here. but it's been excavated over the last 30 years by the University of California and has produced a lot of artifacts, some of which you're going to see today. This is the thing that we're faced with when we're dealing with the challenges of data collection. That is a modern day house that I took a photograph of from the Nile River. I kind of like this because the setting is wonderful. Your home is literally right smack on the banks of the Nile River. And can you relate to the laundry hanging right there? I think we can all relate to that. One thing I noticed when I was over there in Egypt and we were there on a dig for 6 weeks, we were washing our clothes out in the bathtub of the rooms that we had. You can kind of just rinse the dust out. You can't get it really clean. Anyway, you put the stuff out on a line outside, 10 minutes, dry. The humidity is so low, it dries almost instantly. And that's kind of stuff that's kind of fun too. Challenges in data collection, we have the fact that most of the surviving evidence that we have was produced by and for the king and or the elite, so it's biased with an upper level of the society. The texts and the monuments that we have were overwhelmingly produced by men. So that gives us a bias in the fact that they are doing it with a male point of view. Surviving text and representational materials do include images of the non-elite, regular folk, but when they occur, many of those were produced specifically to serve the purposes of upper echelon people, and I'll show you some examples, thus providing us with limited information. And most of the surviving evidence in general comes from funerary contexts. That gives us bias. We still, however, have a huge amount of information. Societies, of course, changed it over time in 3,500 years. Look how much we have changed in just 250 years. What we do know, the nucleus of all levels of Egyptian society was the family. I'm going to show that to you on every of the levels that we already saw. The non-elite, the middle group, the upper group, the kingly group. You're going to see differences and you're going to see similarities. This is a small statue group. We have quite a few of these that have survived. They can be this big, they can be this big. They're not usually the size of a room. These were small things that would be placed in the tomb of the deceased as a place where their immortal soul could actually reside in this world. We'll talk about, I think we'll have to talk about that a little bit more in the future, their idea of the afterlife. They truly believe that you never really die, that we just transition into another form of life and afterlife, that you could communicate with someone who had passed on by going to a tomb like this, by standing near something like this, which brings into your mind the idea of the person who was once alive. Just by saying their name, they believed you would make them live forever. You want to make somebody live forever? Simply repeat their name. If I say King Tut, you know who I'm talking about? Worked for him, didn't it? He's still with it. Now, he's not walking around. He's not going to come to dinner tonight. But the idea of him. Every time I go and visit my parents out at Valley Forge Memorial Park, I may stand there. I'm going to think of them. I'm going to even maybe say words about them. In essence, I'm keeping them alive, aren't I? By keeping their memory going. I'm getting off track, so let me go back to here and show you what we need to know. In the center is the husband. This is a regular, group of regular people in Egypt living on the riverbanks, like in that house I just showed you. In the center is the male, the father, dad. On the left-hand side is his wife, Mrs. On his right-hand side, the smaller figure, a daughter. What we're looking at here, because we're going to trace this out over time right now. First thing to look at, who is the biggest, most important character in this statue group? The male, right? He is taller than she is, either one of them. He has his left leg extended a little bit, indicating that he is in motion, that he is still, hale and vibrant. You can tell by the style of the hair that she has on the left, on our right, The style that the daughter has, those two hairs are exactly the same. Most of the time they were wigs, but not always. And why would they wear wigs? This is something else to think about as fellow human beings. Tiny livestock in your hair, right? Do kids today still get checked in elementary school to see if they have head lice? Of course we do. They've been with us as long as people have. A good way to not get them is to shave your hair off. No place for them to live. Lots of people in Egypt like to have their heads shaved. That's nothing to do with what we're talking about with women per se. What I want to show is the composition here. The male is in the center. The male is the larger character, therefore dominant. In ancient Egyptian art, overwhelmingly, at least 90% of the time, the flesh of men was painted in a brownish terracotta color. The flesh of the women was painted in a yellowy tan color. This does not reflect their actual skin tone, which of course is darker complected. They live in North Africa. But this is a canon of art that's throughout Egyptian history where we know at one glance who are the males and who are the females. I'm pointing to this particular statue because you're going to see it goes through all the way up to royalty. Where is the left arm of the woman over here on the right? Can you see her holding on to her husband's arm? Where is the arm of the daughter? Holding on to the husband's arm, embracing. The arms of both of these women, the right arm is around behind his back. And I will show you some examples where you can actually see their hand on his torso from behind. I want to point this out because the central role, no matter what level of society you were on in Egypt, was the family. The intimacy of the family, male, females, children, that sort of thing. That intimacy is being shown in the statuary. The women are grasping on to the husband. He, however, is shown as larger, shown as bigger, shown with a leg in motion, indicating that he is more important in this composition, but they haven't left out the women. The intimacy of the family. We go to another group from the same time period. Here we've got a difference. The woman is seated in the middle, not on either side. But can you tell from what we just learned who was the most important person in this statue group? The person on the left, right here. Head is taller, right? His leg is just out just a little bit. Hers are even over there. In this case, the woman has been placed in the center. We have a child over on our far left over here. We have the person who is obviously the leader of the family, the husband, is over there to our right. And where is her arm going? Over to his arm. Can you see it? Make sense? She's wearing an absolutely beautifully fitting gown. At the top of it, it has been embroidered and decorated. That's important too for ancient Egyptian life. The son is a little bit shorter, but he's an itty bitty tiny bit taller, the top of his head, than mom is over here. Can you make that out? That's how you read these kind of things. But what is important throughout the whole thing, the family is portrayed together. The wife is embracing her husband. The family is what counts. Another group from the same time period, this is from the age of the pyramids, all of these you've seen so far. We have here a very prominent female, and off to her right on our left is the husband. His name is Seneb. This one has inscriptions on it that we can tell which person it is. This one is very famous in Egyptian art for its preservation, number one. Can you tell who's the male and who's the female right away? Yep. Now, look where her left arm is, on the bicep of her husband. Can you make that out? Look at him, however. He's seated on his chair, cross-legged. Can you make that out? Guess what they did here? There are two children down below next to her legs. Where are those children positioned? just below the legs of the father who is seated cross-legged. Why did they put those two children there? He's seated cross-legged because he is a natural small person, an achondroplasic dwarf, naturally born dwarf. He is seated cross-legged with the children standing where his legs would normally be if he was a full-size person, because when you glance at it, does it look like he has normal-sized legs? You see that? That's why they did it, to make him appear normal. Look at the backside. Where's her arm? Isn't this cool? This stuff is over 4,000 years old. They're human beings just like we are. They woke up to the same blue sky that's out there today, the same white clouds, the same Nile River. Husbands, wives, people with kids. Down below, you see an image on the left over there. The brownish person is a young boy. The white-colored person is a young girl. The family is always portrayed together. The arm around the back of the husband is incredibly important here too. We're moving up in society with this statue. Now we're up to the level of a priest. How do I know that this guy is a priest? Can you see a bandana over his shoulder right here? Over his left shoulder, can you make that out? Anytime you see a portrait or a statue of someone with that bandana over their shoulder, that is indicating a priest. That's how you know. So in his day, he was a priest. The collars around his neck are what's known as the gold of honor. It would be like taking hundreds of wedding rings of gold, threading them together, and then wearing it around your neck this way. An exceedingly high honor, only issued by the king himself to someone who did something extraordinary. He got two of them, so he's important. Does he have any hair? No. We have two females and two smaller children. Over here, the next one in height and size is the wife. And then over here on the other side would be a daughter. And down below here, they're eroded away pretty terribly. But we've got two of the children, all in the most prominent person here is the guy in the center. And once again, where's her? You see her hand on his chest, on his torso? Can you where's my pointer? I can't see it from this angle. Right there. His hand, her hand, is all the way around. Now, there's a little bit of artistic license here. She would have to have one heck of a long arm, right? But the one I'm focusing on, the same motif. We go back to regular person statue. We come up through society to a guy who's a priest. We have the same basic way of portraying them. The male is the dominant character. The women are right beside him, or the children. The intimacy of wrapping the hands around the person is still there. When we go up another level, these would be palace officials. You can see how elaborate her wig is, how elaborate his wig is, how fancy the clothes that they're wearing is. He's got a pleated skirt on his big linen gown that he's wearing over top of everything else. He's also wearing one of those collars of gold. He is an exceedingly high position. You can't see it from this angle, and I couldn't find a good one. Guess where her arm is? Doesn't take too many guesses. Now, that woman which is to his left is the woman that was in my very first slide when I was sitting on a tomb with the pyramids in the background. She is the queen of a king whose name was Menkaure, and that he's shown there. He's shown just a bit taller than her, so that indicates how much he respected her. Can you see that her left leg is extended? He honored her that way too, though she's in motion, but is her left leg as far out as his is? No. Where is her left arm on his bicep? Make it out right there. Where's her right hand? Can you see it on his side? We've gone from that first three-person statue group of the man in the middle with his wife and a child, all the way up through to kings themselves. We've got the same thing. That's what I was trying to trace out for you. the intimacy, the importance of the family. Doesn't matter if you're the king, doesn't matter if you're a regular person living on the banks of the Nile River. They all emphasize the unbelievable importance of the nuclear family. That is what is important. Please, thank you.
Are there any non-traditional family examples?
Wonderful observation. Are there any non-traditional families portrayed? And it is exceedingly rare. And you don't know what the relationship is. There is a tomb at a site called Saqqara that has the step-shaped pyramid at it. There's a tomb there called the Tomb of the Two Brothers. And carved on the walls of that tomb everywhere are two male figures. Sometimes they're shown in embrace, right? Their inscriptions indicate that they worked in the palace and that they were doing hair of the pharaoh. Now, I know this sounds bizarre. People have often said they must be gay. Well, of course. I mean, just because you cut hair doesn't mean that, of course not. So when you say non-traditional family, were there things like same-sex marriages and that sort of thing? Not as far as we know. There's plenty of scholarly argument about what this Tomb of the Two Brothers actually means. Were they two brothers? Were they intimate, in the work that they did? It appears that they were biologically related. One scholar wrote an article about it, and he felt that they could be replaced or representing conjoined twins. So it stirred up it's a fantastic observation, but by and large, I would say that I can't think of anything other than regular marriages that I see portrayed. Very good point to bring up. Virtually all women would have been expected to get married and raise a family. One thing we do not have a whole lot of info on, little is known about how marriages were arranged. Were there preferred marriages, which means you are strongly encouraged to marry that person by way of your social structure or your family or whatever? Prescribed marriages. That's one of those situations where someone tells you when you're 9 years old you're going to be marrying that person over there because that's the way it's done in your society, your family. You don't have no choice. You're going to be marrying that person. The other possibility of marriages, of course, is who you must marry and who you must not marry, right? All of that still exists in the modern world today, and it existed in the past. But we don't know how much of that actually went on in ancient Egypt. Were any of those, ideas even matter to them? Marriage was not a matter for the state. There were no religious or legal ceremonies or sanctions that we know of. You did not have to go down to City Hall and get a license. It was arranged between two families. Women kept control of the property and goods they brought into a marriage, and they could dispose of them as they wished, typically by passing on equally to their children. We do have a papyrus where the woman is enraged, and the note in the papyrus is she cut one of her kids out of the will because he disrespected her, etc. Cut him right out of the will. That happened 4,000 years ago too. Upon the death of her husband, a woman received 1/3 of their joint property. The remaining 2/3 were usually divided equally among his children, both male and female. So many modern day concepts that we have if a marriage has ever ended for one reason or another, were already in place thousands of years ago in ancient Egypt. What do we have for actual things from women in ancient Egypt? Let me take you back and show you actual artifacts, starting with 1,000 years before they ever built a pyramid. How about that to start out your day? What the heck is this thing? Very abstract. There's no legs. There's only like the bottom, like a mermaid or something that maybe you could hold on to. What about the face? Do you see any face? No. Now, they've given us a clue that this is representing a female person. Of course. What's interesting in most, if not, I don't want to say all, but it's overwhelmingly in the beginnings of religions in all these ancient societies, Females were incredibly important as being portrayed as deities. The idea of a different kind of goddess and that sort of thing, overwhelmingly, so many of them were portrayed as females. This is one of the earliest, as I say, I use the word cultic. We never know, exactly the nuts and bolts of their religion down to, did they go on Sunday? Did they go on Monday? Did they go on Tuesday? What exactly did you do in a religious ceremony? They had hundreds of gods and goddesses. The gods and goddesses were to explain the things that were in their natural world. They began to develop what we call today a religion, but this is a focus. I don't know if you would call it a focus of worship, but it shows up again and again and again and again. People don't really know who this represented. There's no face. There's no head. At this time period, they worried if they put a human face or head on it that maybe this thing could come alive and do you damage. The other thing that I have seen very sadly, this particular figure, which is in the Brooklyn Museum of Art, it's about maybe 12 inches high, has been used as an example that aliens were here on the planet, because there's a picture of one of them. I don't think so. That was supposed to be tongue-in-cheek because of the face, right? Here, let me just say, here's a piece of pottery. Can you find the figure on it? Right there. That's a boat out on the river. There's men in behind. So it's sailing down the river. They've got that cultic figure on the front of the boat to protect them. How about this piece of pottery? Can you find that figure? Okay, can you find it? Right where I put the red box. Same basic thing. This is a drinking cup. Can you see the figures around the rim? Do they have heads? Do they have faces? Nope. But they had a religious significance. Whatever you pour into that cup, those goddesses are going to imbue it with all, like holy water or something like this. Because whatever you drink from there has been blessed by those goddesses standing around the rim.
If they're women, why are they terracotta in color?
There's a wonderful point. Remember, Dr. Steve was just up here. 90% of the time, the women are yellow. In this particular case, they are still just the color of the clay from which they made that cup. So they did not specifically paint their bodies like they do in artwork or in statues. It's the natural color of the clay that has been left there the way it is. The only thing that you can see is they're fastened on with a little bit of gypsum plaster, the white around their body, around their waist. That's to help hold them in position. But the reason here you can see that they are exactly the same color as the cup that they're sitting on, they're made from the same clay. And they were not painted. Is this interesting stuff? I mean, I don't think you have too many people who come here and drag you through this kind of stuff, huh? It's different. It's different. How about those? Is it getting even more bizarre? Yeah. But now we can at least see, with the body that has no legs, how you could have conceivably used them. These could have been in a temple context. They could have been in somebody's house for all we know. But it is the beginnings of organized religion in ancient Egypt with figurines like this. This, as I say, is 1,000 years before the pyramids. And to give you an idea of context again with that stuff, Cleopatra didn't come along until almost 3,000 years after this thing was made. Julius Caesar, Mark Antony, they all lived in the 1st century BC before our current era. They all witnessed pyramids that were 2,500 years old when they were born. Julius Caesar's closer to Netflix than he is to the pyramids by 500 years. Do we recognize that kind of a figurine? The concept of motherhood. Yes, of course. Do we still carry children like this today? Uh-huh. This is carved out of ivory. But it is already 1,000 years before the pyramids were getting this importance of motherhood, etc. Personal adornment is evident in this time period. These examples are both in the Penn Museum. Both are combs. Or the one below is a comb slash hairpin. There's a comb up top up here, and with very, very short tines, I guess to comb very short hair. The one down below, it's actually laying on its side, and some of the tines are broken off. But if you flip that thing upright, it could hold the back of your hair. You could pull your hair back in a bun and put that through the hair and hold it like a hair clip. And can you see that the top end is carved to look like a swan? Personal decoration was important to men and to women at least 1,000 years before they ever built a pyramid. This is how long we've been dressing ourselves up. Kind of neat, huh? These are ivory hair pins, also in our collection. Once again, pull your hair back, pull it in a bun, stick it right through. Go out, you could, if you're going to go out to dinner that night, well, I'm teasing go out to dinner. But if you're going to do something fancy, you can do the hairpin. If you just need to get it out of your way while you're working in the garden, you got the hairpin. Hairpins, these are 4,500 years old. Bangles, bracelets. You can wear these as the top one is made of a semi-precious stone called carnelian, cut into round discs, then drilled through the center, then threaded with a piece of sinew or a piece of leather. You could wear it as a bracelet if it's big enough. You could wear it as an anklet if it's big enough. You can make it really long and wear it around your waist. The two bangles down below are made of bone or ivory. They make great bracelets. You could probably wear either one. You could probably wear any of that stuff today, couldn't you? I think you could wear any of it. How about this one? We're still 1,000 years before the pyramids. Could you wear that today? Yes. No. Maybe. Lapis lazuli, the dark blue stone. Today and then, it only comes from the mountains of Afghanistan, which is 2,000 miles away from Egypt. Already this far back in time, there were international trade routes going. And we know because we're finding stones from Afghanistan in tombs in Egypt. The yellow is gold, the red is carnelian and jasper. With like bumblebees and things here, beads of gold. It's a piece that you could wear today for sure. It's 1,000 years before the pyramids. Women in the public sphere. Men and women participated in day-to-day life in ancient Egypt. They were pretty much equal with stuff like that. And I just want to move around here without tripping over my cords. There we go. Women in the public sphere. A statue about the eye. Painted yellow. Grinding grain. Making flour for bread. Woman doing that. Again, this is a little bit of artistic license. Can you see her hair looks like the statue I told you before where we were looking at wigs? It's from the same time period. That's how art history, you diagnose those. But look, she's got frog feet. So there's a little bit of artistic license here. She is grinding grain. The reason I have this here, we might think off the top of our heads, who's going to make the bread? The women will, right? Of course that's not true. This is showing a woman in the process, however, of grinding grain to make whatever she was baking. Now we've got another woman, and she is standing more upright over a big, tall jug. That is taking that grain that they just ground up, adding a little sweetener to it, maybe some liquid to it, and it's going to naturally ferment, which would eventually ferment into a form of beer that the ancient Egyptians adored throughout their history. Bread and beer, two things they adored. Bread and beer. It was not like a cold Heineken. It probably was more like an alcoholic cream of wheat, but they loved it. So she is shown working the mash. This scene, which comes from a tomb of a man whose name was T. We've got two different levels portrayed here. This does not mean that these people are on top of these people. They're beside each other, like the rows of chairs are beside each other. The reason they stack them up like this is so that when you and I look at it, we can see the different people side by side. This shows you the whole process pretty much. The woman in the upper left, who is painted yellow, is seated down on the ground. She's got a mixing mold in front of her made of pottery. She is mixing bread dough. Next to her, which is down below here, we have two more women. We can tell that by the way they're painted, yes. There's also certain anatomical things that also clue us in. The one on the left is leaning over. In her hand, she has a terracotta pot. She is pouring liquid bread dough out into a baking mold sitting on the ground. The woman on the right has a terracotta pot in her hand. She's pouring liquid out into a bread mold. Then what do? You take the other half. It looks like the half of a bell. See this one in the middle? There's two of them. Once you put the bread dough liquid inside the mold, you put another one on top to make that bell shape. Then you can put that in a baking oven, or you can put it into a pile of hot coals, like you would make from burning down a barbecue. The pottery heats up. What happens to the bread? Bakes, yes? It bakes. You could do it today. You could put bread dough in a flower pot and slide it in the oven, and you're going to get a loaf of bread come out in the shape of the flower pot. That's what we have up top. They have baked the bread, and the two men are pulling the bread loaves out of the mold after it has baked. And there is an example of a bread loaf right there. And how many of them are they going to make? The same hieroglyph I showed you before, 1,000. These are breads over here that are done. The whole process, bread making, pouring the bread dough, putting it into the molds, removing it from the molds, stacking it up so it's going to be distributed to people to eat. Men and women are side by side on an equal basis, working together to produce this food product. That is important. Here is a more, end of the line kind of thing. This woman, known as an offering bearer, is portrayed on the wall of a tomb, approaching the tomb owner who was sitting, off the screen on the chair like we saw the first guy, Ihi. She's bringing him baskets of bread to sustain him in the afterlife. I've talked about this before with bringing food to sustain people in the afterlife. I guarantee you that if I go to visit my mom out at that cemetery, she would be much happier if I left an Italian hoagie there instead of a pot of flowers. She'd say, thanks for the flowers, that's really nice, but where's my hoagie? Right? Now, they would do something like that because they believe that spiritually that the deceased could consume that simply because you brought it to where they are. And you know what would happen if I left a hoagie out at that, I'd probably get a ticket for littering. This is how different things are. She is bringing bread to sustain him. Anyone have any questions? I only have about 3 more hours to go. Are you guys good? Are you enjoying this? It's a nifty way to spend a Monday afternoon, isn't it? I'll get done eventually. We've only hit the first, maybe third hour. I know I tend to talk too much. We are getting close to an hour. Is everybody okay? Can I keep going? I always want to ask because I know it's hard to sit in these chairs for a long period of time, but I really want to show you more of what I've got to share with you. Women in the ritual sphere, what do we have here? This is a whole row of dancers. The paint that once was on them has long faded away, but we can tell obviously that these are women. They've got a cross bandana across their chest. These are ritual dancers, shown in the performance of a religious ceremony that would have been created at the interment of the deceased. So the funerary procession, the dancers, the priests doing their thing, the women are equal part of it. In this particular scene, up in the very top, this was a high official, a man named Rekmire, painted on the wall of his burial chamber. Up on the very top, see the thing that looks like a sled? Right there. Inside that is the coffin of the deceased. That is essentially the ancient Egyptian hearse. It's being pulled by these animals and all these men, and they're heading towards the tomb. Lining the pathway going towards the tomb, we've got these chaps down here to the left. They're carrying things on their shoulders that they're going to put in the tomb for the man to use in the afterlife. Right in the center and in the front, we've got a whole row of people heading towards the tomb carrying papyrus blossoms and lotus flowers. What's right there in the middle? You see that yellow skin? It's a group of women. What are they doing? I've enlarged it. They are professional mourners. Their job is to wail at a funeral. We have 3 generations doing it. We have the older women up, the taller ones. We've got another generation down below here and a very young female down here. 3 generations of professional mourners. I often swear my mother-in-law, God bless her, she lives over at Normandy Farms. She could be a professional mourner. Take her to the airport to meet somebody. She'll be crying 10 minutes before the plane even lands. She'll cry if anybody, you need somebody to cry for somebody getting off the plane, she'll be happy to do it. Well, this was their profession. You may be able to see it, but a couple of these women here and here, they paint tears on their eyes. Isn't that an interesting role for women to have? Professional mourners, professional dancers and musicians in a funerary context. Over on the right-hand side of this scene portrays a table piled high with foods and sweets and things like that. We've got the ritual dancers in the center who are dancing. Over on the left-hand side, in one of the very rare examples of a full face individual, you can see both their eyes. These are both women, and yes, they are painted in the terracotta color, as are the women here who are the dancers, and that may in this case indicate that they are from the very southern part of Egypt, what's today known as Sudan, what in antiquity was known as Nubia. That it could be closer to natural because people from that area would be more expected to be musicians or in this sort of a context. Look at the earrings this person's wearing. Solid gold. Look at the size of them. Look at the collar around her neck, and she's playing a double-edged flute. This is 3,300 years old, give or take. How about that person? Is that pretty amazing? Can you do that? Do you do that in your, no, I can't do that if I tried in my head. Look how elaborately, she's, a little bit scantily dressed. I apologize for that. But this would have been an acrobatic performance that's going on with this big ritual while someone's being buried. Look how intimately they portrayed her hair. You see the individual braids, the curls, etc. This is an extraordinary piece of artwork. Whoever was the artist was exceptional in my mind. Royal women. Here we've got the royal women of the household or the palace. They're all seated on the ground. They're being attended to by other women. This woman right here is leaning over, applying something to the shoulder or adjusting her dress. The woman right here has a pot in her hand, which is probably filled with wine or water, going to fill the cup that she's holding down. Well, she's holding lotus blossoms. Here over on the left, she's handing her a collar to put around her neck. The woman over here is adjusting her hair. Those white things on top their heads are cones of wax that they used to imbue with highly scented oils and things like this. Supposedly they wore this on their head or put it on top of the wigs because the heat of the human body would cause the wax to melt and give off the perfume of whatever they soaked it in. I think life is easier now, huh? A dab behind the ear will do just fine. You don't have to wear a wax cone on your head. Dab behind the ear, a little bit on that, that'll do just fine. I'm just using this pyramid as an example of the time period we're working on. We now have marched all the way up to the age of the pyramids. We have this statue pair from this guy was built by King Seneferu. The man on the left is his son. And seated with him is his wife. This is an exceedingly famous statue from ancient Egypt that is pretty much life-size. It literally sits about this high. The inscriptions are all original. It looks like it's 2 statues, but it's actually 1. She is in that yellow color. He is in the terracotta color. They're very equal in terms of their level of height. He's not very much bigger than she is he? They're both royal. She may even be part of the royal family. We're not 100% sure. Her name is Nofret, which is written right over here. You can see the symbols that are written right there, ending with that character of a seated woman. That's her name right here. She's wearing an absolutely exquisite linen gown, beautiful collar around her neck, beautiful headband. Look at her wig. In many of these statues, they would make the eyes out of paste glass, so they look real. In some statues, they used real glass, and so boy, it looked real. But she is exceedingly well preserved for the age. This is 4,500 years old. It shows that same thing, the importance of the family, the importance of the nuclear family. They're both together. The Great Pyramids themselves. The man who built the Great Pyramid, the one over here on this side, is that statue. It's the only statue that we have of him, by the way. It's this big. The guy who built the Great Pyramid, whatever happened to all his statues, we don't know, but we only have this one left. That's his daughter. Look how they portray her. She's wearing a leopard skin outfit. That means she is the highest priestess of the land. No one is above her. She's the daughter of the king. She's seated before a table laden with loaves of bread. She is, this panel would have been put outside the entrance to her tomb. So that it's kind of like how we use a tombstone, they use this kind of a thing. In fact, it's the precursor of the tombstone we use today. Sitting on a royal chair with lion's feet on the bottom of it. See, there's the hieroglyph for 1,000 again. And here, that's 1,000 loaves of bread, and that's 1,000 jars of beer. This is the king himself, the one we saw before. Over on the left over here is his wife. We looked at this before. Her arm is holding on to his bicep. Her leg is extended. She is almost, if not the same height as he is, showing the intimacy between the two. We've got scenes like this. The king himself is this miniaturized person perched on her lap. The person that he's on the lap is Queen Ankhesemenret II, and her husband was the king, Pepi I. He's going to be Pepi II. Look at the importance that he gives to her. He is perched on her lap. I'm going to walk through a couple of these, and I think it reminds you of anything. We saw this one. Remember this one? Any similarities there? I think so. Can you think of anything else? All righty. Let me rattle your memory. Late in Egyptian history, this is the goddess Isis with the horn thing on her head and the disc. What's perched on her lap? A male figure. Yes, it's one of their major gods of ancient Egypt who they called Horus. Does this remind you of anything? How about that? Boom. Right through. 4,000 years. When we go back to the first one, the ivory one where the woman had the baby on her hip, to this, not to this one, to this one, that is more than, in ancient Egyptian, even more than 3,000 years. And then it comes right into our world over and over and over again. Does that look like, they look similar? Not trying to beat the horse, but intriguing. I think we're almost at a point where we're going to stop. We did this. We talked about the queens. I just want to talk about very powerful women in ancient Egypt. We're almost done. Everybody all right? I mean, I apologize for talking so much, and I appreciate that you haven't fallen off your chairs. There were exceptionally powerful women in ancient Egyptian history. This woman here, Queen Nofret, is later on, not the same name, but later on. She was a powerful king in the time period midway between King Tut and pyramids, and portrays herself almost as a ruler. In the time period of King Tut, we've got this exceedingly famous statue of Queen Nefertiti, the wife of King Tut's father, actually King Tut's stepmother, that she is portrayed as ruling with her husband throughout her life on an equal basis. That was extraordinary. This is from the back of the throne of King Tut himself. The back panel of the throne that he actually sat on was found in his tomb. King Tut is over here on the left. His queen, his bride, Ankhsenamun, is standing in front of him. She's holding a cup in her hand. She's extending her hand and putting an unguent or a liquid on the shoulder of her husband. I love to show this picture because when this was carved, both of them were about 11 or 12 years old and already married. And she is one of his half-sisters. Another factor in ancient Egyptian history. His dad had, with Queen Nefertiti, had 6 daughters but no sons. He had another queen with which they had Tutankhamun, which is why he could take over the throne. So he was married to one of his half-sisters. Ramses the Great, you've heard of him. His wife, Nefertari, in a spectacular tomb, one of the most beautiful tombs preserved in ancient Egypt. She was such a powerful female in her day. He built an entire temple dedicated to her. This is the one dedicated to him, right next door. Well, I know why I put this here. These are 65 feet high, all of them. This temple is 125 feet high. At the base of his legs, here it is in large. What's standing at the base of his legs? His wife. So this massive statue, he did not leave her out. It is all about him, but he didn't leave her out. The importance of women in something like this. This is right next door. This is carved out of the face of a mountain, by the way, like Mount Rushmore on steroids. There she is right here. He's on the right, she's right there, he's in the middle. He's in the middle here, she's in the center, he's over there. We've got 4 portrayals of him and 2 of her. Equal height, equal importance. On the inside of the tomb, he is shown over here making offerings to the gods. And guess what? She is shown here in exactly the same position of power as her husband, and she is making offerings to the gods. That is as high as you can get in society. There they are, the 2 temples side by side. There's another one around the bend here, Queen Nefertari, where she was actually buried. And it is down underneath in here. The Valley of the Kings is right over the hill there. Look at her tomb. Isn't it spectacular? He adored her. They were married when they were teenagers, and he never quite got over. She apparently died in her 20s. It may have been complications from childbirth. Ramses II had over 100 kids. She certainly didn't have all of them, thank God. But no, he so adored her that he made this breathtakingly beautiful tomb. We can look at that at another, but look at this. Is this breathtaking? Every single room looks like this. Even the ceiling is painted in stars. There she is with her own cartouche, usually reserved for the name of men. But she's got it. And when this was found back in the early 20th century by a guy named Ernesto Schiaparelli. Have you ever heard of a clothing designer named Elsa Schiaparelli? Very famous in the 1920s and 30s. Brother of the man who found this tomb. He found in the tomb, carved of alabaster, some of her personal cosmetics. This beautifully carved thing with a little hedgehog up on the top of it, you can slide it open, and even to this day, her eye makeup is still in there. That's what the black stuff is. And what's really amazing is she used half of it. So more than meets the eye, it's the black stuff that you would put to outline your eyes. It was still in her tomb. She was going to make sure she was going to be looking fine in the afterlife, wasn't she? A pair of her actual sandals were found in the tomb. The metal strap, of course, is a replacement for the museum that this is in. But look closely. You can see in here that her footprints are embedded into, can you see it in the matting in the shoe? See, I mean, literally, it's nothing pleasant, but it's her sweat stains from her foot. Does this bring it home? I mean, this woman wore these dang sandals. I'll top off just really quick. There were women in Egypt who ruled as kings, full-fledged. One of the earliest ones we know, represented by this badly damaged statue, her name was Sobek-Neferu, the wife of a reigning king. The king dies. His son is going to take over. She is his sister. They apparently ruled together for a while, and it is suspected that they may have actually been married. Something that's not so pleasant in ancient Egypt. It's not uncommon for fathers to marry, royal fathers, kings, to marry a daughter and produce kids. For brothers to marry sisters and produce kids. We not only know the moral consequences of that today, but the genetic consequences. They assumed they were keeping the royal family pure. We do know that for at least 3 to 4 years, this woman ruled independent of anybody else, and a powerful ruler. Queen Hatshepsut, she was on the throne for over 20 years. She was supposed to rule with her stepson after the death of her father. He was too young to rule on his own, so she took over the throne, ostensibly until he's old enough to do it himself. She winds up on the throne for 20 years. And after he finally takes the throne, apparently the relationship between the two wasn't all that good, because he goes all around the country hacking her name out. I won't go through all of this. It's too much for this, too late. But she built that temple. She sent an expedition down to Africa. They brought back trees. There's temples dedicated to her. She is shown here making offerings to the gods like a male would do. She's got this fantastically beautiful tomb, or a temple, that still is a major tourist attraction in Egypt today. She may have been buried in that tomb here, but we're not 100% sure. I'm going to skip through this. We actually have her coffin, which is spectacular, and we have images of the guy she ruled with, one of the best statues preserved. I think we are close enough that I just want to see how she's hacked out. See how she's hacked out? See on the left-hand side how it's all hacked out, and the stuff on the right is good. In this piece, the stuff on the right is good, the stuff on the left has been hacked out. That is how you erase someone's memory. Literally hack out their name. And we come back to her very famous temple. The last native ruler of ancient Egypt was a woman. Who was that? I showed her to you already. Cleopatra, yes. So there she is. Subject for another class sometime. Is that her? We're not 100% sure. The statue was made some years, maybe a century or more after she died. Her name is not carved on it anywhere. It's the right hairstyle, the right hairband, the right kind of look. We're not even 100% sure exactly what that woman looked like. What I can guarantee you, she did not look like that. Thank you for giving me so much of your time this afternoon. I'm going to draw this to a close and open up if anyone has any questions or wants to do any discussion. That's why we are here. Never hesitate to ask a question. There's no such thing as an embarrassing or a bad question. You know, the only bad question is the one never asked. You're not being tested. You're not being judged. We are here just for the pure enjoyment. Did you learn a lot of stuff you never knew before? That's why we're here, right? Oh, we've got books and documentaries and all this wonderful stuff about ancient Egypt, but I like to dig down under the surface and see what it was like to actually have been an ancient Egyptian in the time when the pyramids were brand new. They were humans just like us. That's what I like to share. Wait until in September, when we talk about mummies. I'm going to put that into context that sometimes depending on where I go, I call that lecture, I Want My Mummy. And I will show you why when I say Egypt, you think of pyramids, you think of the Nile River, the desert, and what else? Mummies. That will be September, perfect for the change of seasons and the upcoming Halloween season. Does anybody have any questions other than can we please go home, Dr. Steve?
Anybody, any questions? I have to be honest, I think you covered it all. I learned an immense amount. How about all of you? I am fascinated about the role of women in that time, how they were depicted, and the correlation with them holding the baby, the kings, and modern day.
Right. That's amazing how they're all exactly the same motif. It's pretty fun stuff.
Well, please join me in thanking Dr. Steve as he brought this here today.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it much.
And thank you to all of you that were willing to open up and expand your horizons today. Have a great one.
Are you partying for the 4th of July?
We've been partying all along. I think we partied a lot last month, too.
It might be a little toasty for a barbecue, but what the heck.
Yeah.